We're on time, right?
Yes.
Ready. Will you start, please?
So today we have got 4 friends who have been invited for the session today. The first one is Mr. Terry Vulga. He is a retired headmaster living in Surrey nowadays.
Pleasure to see you here.
And
Most
next
welcome.
is Mr. Adrian Weston. He lives in Alton, and by profession he is
Alton.
engineer. Yes, engineer.
And what's the engineer by please?
And the 2 other gentlemen, Mr. Vitali.
Gentleman, one gentleman and one lady.
One
Yes.
lady, yes. Mr. Vitali Kimkovich. Rimkovich, yes. I'm sorry.
Arimkovich,
Yes.
correct.
And
You're from Romania or somewhere?
No.
Belarus.
Belarus.
Yes.
It's Eastern Europe, anyway.
Yeah, it is.
And his fiancée, Miss Natalia.
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 Russian?
Yes.
Right, because Natalia is the Russian version of Natalie. In English, what is Natalie is Natalia in Russian.
Right.
Right.
Natalia and Natasha is
Natasha, the same.
Yes.
Yes.
Natasha.
Yes.
I
Same.
learned that name from some Russian girl, and we liked in the family. They liked it so much that I started naming the children girls. The name of Natasha, and it's a very popular name in our Jamaat, our community.
So both are here on a study project to study the after effects of Chernobyl incident.
I see.
Yes.
Right. To study, they should go there to study the after effect. Not come here. It's the other way around, isn't it? Very disastrous thing
Yes.
to happen, fortunately. Please.
Yeah, please.
My first question,
Yes, please.
yes, thank you. My first question is about the nature of faith and the nature of reality. Many
Nature of reality, and what was the first word?
faith, the nature
Yes,
of faith.
that's right, yes.
Many religions hold within their belief systems that the adherents should practice the presence of God. And it occurs to me that faith by its very nature is faith in the unseen, faith in the unknown, faith in something that is not obtained. And my difficulty in understanding this is, how does one move from a position of faith to the reality, practicing the reality
That's right.
of God? So where does faith end
It's a very,
and where does the reality begin?
it's a very,
And
very
is it
interesting
possible?
question, which should be answered with reference to the period of Renaissance and what questions were raised during Renaissance, and how the British philosophers in particular handled those questions. But I should go farther back, and in fact it was in the 9th century that one philosopher, British philosopher by the name of Scotus, John Scotus, 800 some years, when he first raised this question, surprisingly, and he was a believer, but to support his belief, he said, although I believe in rationality and reason to have an edge over faith, but I don't dismiss faith as merely an area of supernatural and fantasy. What he said, which was quite logical, his position was that the faith to have got entrenched so deeply and profoundly in human vision and human mind and human heart that people could offer any sacrifices for this. In the beginning, faith must have some sound reason to support it. They must have seen things which, viewed from remote distances, may not be convincing at all to the present generation. But the starting generation in religion does not believe in things if they are just fantasies. They believe in things which they have witnessed to have been fully supported by the evidence which at that time was considered to be enough evidence. So it fades out the evidence part and the faith continues. And when faith continues, from time to time it has to be re-challenged from the new realities which appear. And when the new realities challenge the faith, then one must examine with a cool head the pros and cons on either side. And then if reason rejects faith, faith should be rejected and reason should be adopted. That I think, having studied the philosophy of European thought regarding religion, revelation, reason, rationality, I've come to the conclusion that the Scotus's view was in fact the most wonderful and based on sheer common sense. So this is how it stands. One should not believe in anything unless he has sound reasons to believe. Without sound reasons to believe, belief is just mere fantasy and it cannot stand the test of time. This is a very important factor which we must keep in view. Now I am talking now of the later stages, the age which has distanced itself from the time of the beginning of religions. What happens there is no role of logic or reason, rationality to play in the faith of the common run of the people. They inherit faith, and when humans inherit faith, then there are two types of people born out of those generations: those who turn right and those who turn left, and those who become conscious of the fact that the faith cannot contradict realities. If they do not find a reconciliation between their faith and reality, they turn to the left and say it's all hocus pocus, or even if they don't say, their life in practice become uninfluenced by religion. Faith does not dictate terms to them anymore. Those who turn right, they are those people who are largely incapable of thinking and addressing such questions in depth, so they continue to be carried along the flow of the generation after generation. Faith continues with them, staunchly held, but is not soundly rooted because it has no connection with reason. So whenever their personal choices appear between right and wrong, they always choose the wrong, or most often choose the wrong, because when the faith which has no sound basis clashes with the personal interest of humans, then personal interests are always preferred. Now this leads to a continuous deterioration in morality of the people, and a time comes when the faith flies overhead. It is not in gear with the human actions. So any faith having reached this stage loses its power and hold over the way of human life. Then comes the role of the priests of any religion, not just the Christians. Now they make a compromise between this situation, in this situation of two extremes. They say, all right, as long as you don't change names, as long as you remain my territory, it's okay, go ahead and do what you please. We'll shut your eyes to your way of life. But in doctrine, that is the beginning. In doctrine, don't oppose the doctrine publicly and openly. If you do that, then you will be punished. So that phase also gradually fades out, and what remains is then the open challenges begin to appear, and the church further withdraws. And it says, all right, remain Christians, don't become Muslims or Hindus or anything for that matter, and we are quite all right. If you can visit the church, okay, but still you are a good Christian. Christianity is the spirit, it's not a form. You believe in the spirit of Christianity and try to be good to human beings, that's all. So the dictates of religion begin to peter out and dissolve. and become rare things, just values which are not highly essential. Better if you can adopt those values without a personal sacrifice. But still there are people born who can do that with sacrifices as well. It's a very narrow stream of such people which runs along. They are the custodians of faith, in fact. So, in principle, I agree with Scotus. This is my personal view as well. If faith is removed from conviction at the root level, conviction is different, faith is different. What I mean by conviction is which is soundly rooted in reason and rationality. What results is conviction. So faith in the beginning is conviction, it is not faith. Gradually it is called faith because it loses touch with the realities and it begins to fly higher. But in religious literature, of course, you can call it faith. I mean, it is mentioned as faith. But there, the faith is always another name for conviction in the beginning. Now, at this stage, where almost all major religions have gone so far away from their sources, I doubt if any religion doctrine can have any control over human actions unless it is extremely rigid and turns mad, and the objective is not religious and godly, the objective is political. It has only influence over human affairs as long as the object is a material worldly object. To have a national pride in the name of a religious entity and to fight it out with others, there it is not godliness at all which is at work. It is ego, national ego, racial ego, and so on, who take over, and they are, garbed in the cloak of religion and good names. Religion loses its value, and the sure sign is that when the religious leader excite them to riots, bloodshed, murder, or sabotage, they responded. When they call them to good things, to sacrifice, to take care of the poor, and offer all sacrifices in the path of goodness, they keep quiet, they remain silent. So this is how I understand this relationship as we have just raised. Right?
Yes, may I just
Please.
come back? I mean, I understand that, particularly in a corporate sense, religions, belief systems, and so forth.
That's right.
I was particularly thinking of on the personal level, when people claim to have had experiences of God, or charismatic experiences from faith to reality. Because one of the things that it occurs to me is, following on from what you've said, it seems to me that with the communicators, there's a great difficulty in trying to enable people to understand where they are in relation to their personal belief systems. Because the word that's being used now on radio and television, I've noticed it within the past year or so, is there a resonance? That's the word that's being used now, resonance. Do you have a resonance within you for belief? And it seems that people have, the religious communicators have tremendous difficulty either in not frightening people away by them saying, oh, you haven't had this experience, therefore you can't be saved, or whatever, or by positing it in such a way that people can understand and can have a realistic, meaningful belief within themselves.
You know what I understand from your question, this in this second expression, I think I understand the real import of your question. What we need is a moral behavior, or return to moral behavior of society today as never before. We are at the verge of a precipice where once we go forward beyond, then there will be a point of no return. Your question can be turned in a different way. It can be twisted to another. which I thought could be that can religion play any role with faith in religion as the main instrument to convince people to change their way of life to a moral behavior and moral conduct, so that the society becomes more civilized, more cultured, and human affairs are run not only by laws and legislations, but by inner convictions, where goodness is seen to be a value which should not be discarded at any time. Is that the question, or should that be the question, or is it still different? I think I've come a little closer, but not perhaps.
I don't want to take the whole of the question time. It is that people have difficulty in having personal faith, and
Yes,
particularly when some people
get it.
say, you must have this experience of God.
I understand. Under the same question, I was to come to that.
Right.
You know,
Thank you.
I know now what you
Yeah.
mean. I noticed that. Now this role of religion is over as far as the large-scale mass convictions are concerned. It has lost that time.
Yeah.
Now they have turned to the lost line of defense, the religious leaders, and they talk of experiences which are individual, which do not have to be shared by others. Even if they don't believe in those experiences, at least the person who goes through that experience will be influenced by that and will modify his or her life accordingly. So nowadays there is so much talk of spiritual experiences. Now I believe this is a very dangerous area which will not hold water for long, because experiences can be quoted from one side and countered from another. And when experiences are only in relation to personal behavior, it's okay. But very quickly, very soon, they are related and hooked onto the dogmas and beliefs. And they say, this dogma is supported by this experience. Now, when you come to that, it's a very dangerous red line area. Because then dogmas from Hinduism and Buddhism and Confucianism and Muslim Sufis and so on, they all suddenly erupt, to contradict each other and to kick a shindy about all this. So all the benefit will be lost. I believe, provided this religious experience is not used as an evidence of the dogmatic truth of the people who go through this religious experience, is fine. It's good for the persons who do this. And to spread the word around that we found some goodness out of this practice or belief, and it's good for you to try this. Now this experience is also of two types. One can be rational experience, one can be irrational experience. Most often, unfortunately, it is irrational experience, because rational experience is only that which is repeatable, like science. Under the same circumstances, it should repeat itself and demonstrate its truth everywhere in the world under any circumstances, provided you adopt that attitude. This is not so far witnessed, at least by me, to have happened anywhere in the world. Very quickly, the fraudulent people take over this area, and they take over sometimes in mass scale, like in Africa. The so-called spiritual healers, they erupt, like in Syria and Egypt. There are many spiritual healers in the name of Islam, and those who work miracles, apparently, exploiting the ignorance of the people. So so much confusion is born out of this that it cannot be adopted as a safe instrument for rehabilitating faith enough to command your actions. Is that right?
That's fine.
now?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please.
First question is on marriage. Sort of looked and compared British society and marriage. So a lot of people divorced, split families. I'm looking at the Islamic Muslim community.
Right.
Marriages don't tend to seem to fail. There's support within the community to keep them together. I wondered what we should do about it.
You see, it's a reflection of the way of life rather than religion. When the society has become lax and permissive, where courtships are commonplace and never frowned at by the society, then you can have an illegal marriage for some time. And that illegal marriage gives you a sort of freedom which you cannot maintain when you are married. There you can disagree at every point, you can walk out and walk in, and once you are used to this licentious way of life, then marriages become very demanding and difficult to cope with. And then almost both, have had this experience. Suddenly from that free experience to switch over to a relationship of responsibilities, of loyalties, of commitments, is a very big turn and very difficult challenge which arises at every marriage in such societies. The result is that either both cheat each other, or at least one cheats the other, and it goes on sometimes undetected and sometimes detected yet accepted with a silence, with a criminal silence. All right, I don't interfere in your affairs and you don't interfere in mine. Such marriages can be saved, unfortunately, if that is what you call saving of marriage. The marriage is already lost, in fact. But where the possessive natures come into play, even if a woman has been very licentious, she has been keeping dates with Tom, Dick and Harry everywhere, once she gets married, if she is possessive, she would not tolerate this in man. And the vice versa is also right. So mutual jealousies and the lack of trust and moreover suspicions play a very large role in breaking the marriages. Then no longer the husband is sure that whether the children are his, no longer the wife is sure whether it is the office which keeps the husband from returning home in good time, or somewhere else, or whether the office itself has become the seat of rendezvous. So in a society like these, as you have now begun to notice in the higher echelon of British society, this is what I am worried about. This is what I said. We are reaching a point of immoral behavior which is going to hurt us, not because, or not entirely because, you have earned the wrath or displeasure of God. But in religion, the problem is that even the atheists cannot violate the religious laws without being punished. Either they are punished by nature through AIDS and things, or sex-related herpes, or if you shut your eyes to that and call it accidental, the whole society begins to suffer, because religious laws of morality are based on a very, if not on divine teaching, at least on thousands of years of human evolution and learning through experiences. I call it divine teaching because the history supports me. It's not the evolution of society as such, because those societies become ungodly, they don't follow the same trend of evolution in that direction. They very often begin to return back to the path from where they had come. So this is the main problem, and it cannot be resolved by legislations. It's impossible. It cannot be resolved by giving police greater powers. In this area, if not police, social workers and this and that, it will worsen the problems. You don't strike where the disease lies. We must return to a moral rearmament, not in the name of Christianity, not in the name of Islam, but in the name of human values, which are universal. So without creating the universality, rehabilitating the universality concept of morals, without believing in them to be absolute values which have no bearing with your nationality or race or culture, we cannot even move towards peace. We can't take the first step towards peace. So there is one way of settling the issue of peace through Chernobyl, reference to Chernobyl, what happened there, and there is another more lasting and more enduring way of sinking deep into the root causes of all human evil and suffering today. I believe it is because of falsehood which has overtaken the areas which were occupied by truth. You see, even in people like politicians, which had no belief in God or anything, there was a belief in absoluteness of morality. They were trained like that, and they never discarded that early religious training which with them had turned into just morality without name, and they stuck to it. The present generation, unfortunately, is losing that most vital contact with absolute morality. They are turning away, moving away, with the result that right from the royal house down to the street urchins, everywhere there is a complete breakdown, which is unfortunately is not being properly handled by the British people. Right? Please.
Right. I'd like to ask about difference in religion. In religions, is it actually difference in religion or difference in human influence? I mean, we've got quite a lot of religions all over the earth. I mean, like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. Each of them has their own prophets, and they believe in their own prophets. But for me, it seems they're really, really close to each other. But is it people trying to keep? I mean, other people trying to keep another group of people in in the circle, or is it just spiritual dividing, or it's some
It's a very important question. In fact, I have already addressed this question in a short address to the Russian people, which was entitled "To Russia with Love." I told them that many options are appearing before you, and I warn you that most often it will be the wrong turns you will take, not the right ones. You have wasted 70 years of your progress and scientific achievements and come to a dead end. And now frantically you are trying to find a path somehow to continue your journey and advance into the future. There you hear the voices of the Muslim fanatics in the Christian church and economists flooding USSR from America, from England, from other places, and the mafia chiefs trying to have their hold, and the churches are being revived and the mosques are rebuilt. To what purpose? Why? Where will they take you? Will they take you to the same point at 70 years ago, where you had rejected religion, having considered it to have lost its rational value? Are you returning to the same religious dogma, or is it a new, different, improvised version of religion? Without asking this question, just to fall back into the lap of any religion where you originated from, Christianity, Islam, etc., would be sheer blindness. And much worse than before, much, much worse. because 70 years ago, the religious leadership was far more honest than it is today. 70 years ago, it was less involved in political, objectives than it is today. 70 years ago, there was not the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, and there was not a return to Christianity back as a reaction. Christianity had not yet lost its hold on British society and European society altogether. It was a mild decay, but it still was held in some honor. A period has, passed in between, intervened, where most of the European society returned to their own ordinary way of life which they pleased to follow, without permitting any interference from religion. In a very narrow stream of the extremist priests, etc., they continue with a side stream along. But the mainstream of European society, in the meantime, has chucked away all the religious values as nonsensical, or at least to have nothing to do with them. Now they are returning to them with a vengeance, again for a political reason, not for the sake of God at all. Because of the rise of fundamentalism in Islam, because of the new challenges, they want to return back to that shell of Christianity where they could use it as security or safe haven against the ideological onslaughts from other people and races or countries or nations. So you will be surprised to see how rapidly Americans are now, or a section of Americans, is turning back to Christianity. And they are doing it not with a new appraisal of Christianity from rational point of view. They are returning to the rigid shells of Christianity, of which they had, eked out somehow. They got disenrolled from those commitments and had come out to a free world. This rigidity is required because no longer they can find common sense to support the views which are held today by the church. The result is they have to return to a faith where these things are not challenged, where two tightly insulated separate lines are pursued. I think it was Descartes, or was it someone else, but a European philosopher. I've forgotten his name, but I remember is well known among the circles who know philosophy, of course. He was a believer in God, but he also was a believer in rationality. So he warned the church leaders. They said, you will commit suicide if you are drawn into the field of reason and permit your views to be examined through rationality and counter the new views, new philosophies with the help of rational measures. He said, don't be fools. Don't commit this suicide. Keep your faith separate and keep your reason separate. So as such, he survived the challenges of that period, and he was a very rational man, very rational person otherwise. But when it came to faith, he said, no, stop. And this was a mistake committed by the church of that period. They wanted to rationalize the Christian views. Well, the new evidence appearing daily from the study of nature and the scientific advancement discarded those views, but did not discard Christianity. Now, when you make your own distorted views a religion and of your own, but attributed to a previous prophet of God like Jesus Christ, for instance, then you should be blamed for all that follows by way of consequences of this folly. It was that attitude of church which had rejected the warning of that philosopher, perhaps it was Descartes, who was responsible for the generation of a lot of atheism in European society. Because more they learnt of the facts of life, the more they were driven away, and they could not compromise with what they saw and with what they heard from the side of the church. So this is what is happening to you now, and you have to be very, very careful. You have learned something and you have gained something in which your European counterparts are not as well armed as you are. You have returned to sheer logical attitudes. You have discarded faith once and for all, or did discard faith once and for all, on the basis that you can't accept anything which you can't understand. Now, keep to that attitude, adhere it fast, hold it fast, because the moment you leave it, you will be led away, you will be fodder for anything. You know, a sitting duck for these exploiters who come from different countries to visit USSR or various states within the USSR. This is a very grave danger. You must realize it, and the whole Russian society should have realized it. It's too late for them now. You see, this attitude of hard, a hard, let me say, stance concerning rationality or lack of rationality. This is good in one way, but it is a very bad thing and poisonous in another way. When you stick only to reason and rationality for resolving human issues, then you are not only driven away from faith and dogma, you are also driven away from moral values. They cease to hold water anymore. Then utter egoism is born. Now, then your own rationality, your own rational reasoning, rational thinking would tell you, look here, if I follow these mad people coming from abroad and submit to their way of life, what do I lose? Faith I didn't have anyway. Money I didn't have either. So I lose nothing because that is not to be lost. I don't have faith. But there is something to be gained, money and influence. So people at the helm of affairs consciously sell their souls, if there are any souls left, to these new influences. And corruption rules supreme. That is what has happened in USSR. It was against this which I tried to warn right at the very early stages. You know, this article of mine was published by the largest circulating magazine in Moscow. Teams came here who interviewed me after reading that and televised this repeatedly. It was taken over by Kazakhstan and some other states. So it is not that because I am a small person of no significance, the voice could not be carried. Somehow God managed for my voice to be carried across. And I have received some responses from very knowledgeable, highly placed people as well. But this was just a rational appeal without any gains, immediate gains for them. And they had already lost sensibilities for Russian people as a whole. It was their moral failure which had destroyed the system. It was not the system which had destroyed them as such. And this moral failure was inbuilt in the system. So in a way, it was a system. Because the first brick that Marx laid for building his scientific socialism or dialectic materialism was the negation of morality and negation of God. Morality he understood to be an opium or an opiate which would somehow keep the common masses drugged, and they would not know where their interest lay. So he had to do it, but he forgot that it would be communism which would need morality most at a stage when they will capture the power, because corruption, power corrupts of course, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is a common cliche, but it has never been proved so right as in the Russian arena, Russian experiment of communism. Because the power of a totalitarian system is far more absolute than power of any state dictator. Because a state dictator has his own intriguing mind and other things which build a system for his security. But murder can never be ruled out. The system, he has no system. It is just an individual ascendancy which makes a dictator. But with the system of communism, it's impossible for people to wriggle out the red. So that absolute power created Stalin and others in his wake, and nothing could be done against. Stalin himself became so merciless to those who protested against a high-handedness of the military and police, in an attempt to suppress the so-called revolt of the proletariats. What were they demanding? They said a new system has come, but not bread. No bread with it. We want bread. And they were mercilessly gunned down to hundreds of thousands, ultimately in the long run. No voice in protest could rise, because it was a totalitarian system which was in command. So it was the lack of morality which destroyed communism. It was not the failure of system as much. I am 100% certain that it, if tried again with factor of morality added to it, it could still prove to be better in so many respects than the economic system based on capitalism, because that also has its own inherent defects and flaws which develop slowly and gradually, but they do develop. So I don't want to enter into that debate. Let it suffice for the time being that these are your advantages and disadvantages. Stick to reason and rationality. Don't accept anything but with a moral attitude. First decide whether you are loyal to the cause of the people or not. If not, then nothing can save you. Then individuality of each person would draw him away from his responsibility to the people, from which the Russian people at the helm of affair had already been drawn far away before the debacle started. Is it debacle? Is the right pronunciation? Debacle or debacle? Debacle. Debacle, that's right. Yeah. I was not sure this way. I asked this. Before the debacle took place, they had already been driven away from their awareness to the national responsibilities they were holding as trust. So these are the problems with the West now bent upon furthering corruption in USSR to save their interests. In open television discussions, they say, our safety lies in Russian corruption. You say it is through Russian corruption that we can gain an entrance into the society at every level, whereby nothing can be hidden from us. Support the corrupt and you are not afraid of Russia anymore. If you withdraw completely from their affairs, you will have to withdraw if you are neither you are corrupt nor they are corrupt. See, that is a simple formula. You have to make them further corrupt to keep them hooked on to your interests. Then there can be no dearth of spies at any level. Already they have achieved a lot of success in that area, but through corruption. Now, this is ultimately a suicidal policy for the West as a whole. But how long can you keep a corrupt, powerful country which still has the know-how which is so vital for the world in positive way or in the negative way as well? You know, the technical know-how of the Eastern European countries, communist countries, is greater than the technical know-how of the people, you know, if you compare man to man in ratios, because they were subjected to this without having to be paid much. You see, so they had no choice. There's a very large number of such people available who are just rotting. They can be drawn to other countries, they can be bribed, they can be taken away, and if no moral rearmament movement is immediately launched, they would readily sell anything, communism, Russian, everything, for the sake of a better way of life, better life, because they think the freedom has come, but it has not delivered any goods to them. Like communism had come in the time of Lenin, and it had not delivered any goods to them. So proletariats are proletariats. It is exactly the other way around than what Marx had calculated. Only morality can save the cause of a helpless people. Nothing else can work. It was not morality which worked against the interest of the masses, it was immorality of the church or religious leaders which was siding with them. Morality can never side with the helpless and the poor. So the only safety lies even today in the same. If you can make it a campaign, a cause, and spread the word all around, as we are trying to. With, you know, the more number of Ahmadis we are gaining from USSR, we are turning them to such advocates of morality and these values, and they are being charged already with that, with the grace of Allah, and they are helping the people. But there, the problem again is the one which you started with. There you need real conviction. Morality cannot be returned to without a deep conviction in your beliefs, or to God at least. If no belief, if you believe in God, then morality is well supported. Without it, even morality cannot work. You know, from that point of view, I pay tribute to the intelligence, or I should say one-sided intelligence of Marx and Lenin. They knew that morality would lead to God. Very intelligent people, I must say. And they knew this would be against the interest of the communist system. If people turn to God, then they would seek guidance from him, not from Marx or Lenin. So this was the inherent clash between the system which led them away from morality. And the morality was the name of the other edge of the precipice. We shouldn't have crossed over to the line beyond. So this is the dilemma we are facing today.
Thanks.
Please.
And what about politics?
Huh?
What about politics?
Politics.
what which is link between politics and religions, and is it different? Is it same? And what make politics or religions?
Right. The most important thing to begin with is not to link religion with politics, but de-link religion with politics. So much damage has been done to politics by religion and to religion by politics, that for God's sake stop relating them together. The only way you can improve the quality of politics is by only accepting religion is in its moral teachings, no more. The moment you permit dogmas to play a role in politics, the peace of the world will be shattered, never to be rehabilitated again. So what people see the ugliness of religion in promoting these violences and beastly behavior in man in the name of God, that never emanates from the area of moral teachings. It always emanates from dogmas which have lost touch with realities, as you so wisely suggested in the beginning. So that is the true perspective. In the light of this, we should teach morality to politics. And it is not the Russians alone who need this. The entire West, America, North and South, all alike, are unfortunately drifting away from moral values, and they can't stop it. Because the lack of attention to this issue has resulted in the creation of mafias. And mafias and morality cannot run together. Like communism and morality could not go hand in hand. Or God or communism could not go hand in hand. So in an age where mafias are taking over, this is another name of capitalism, where power gets concentrated, but it has also the quality of keeping the lower rung of society at their right places. They cannot raise their head because this monster is far too big for them. So it is not just a dialectical materialism which we find at work. A factor which Marx completely forgot or intentionally turned out of his scheme of things was human mind. You see, human mind was much stronger and powerful than just merely the economic changes brought about by dialectic materialism. And he never brought it into computation at all. I was amazed when I studied Marx. I realized that he was doing it intentionally. Because if you add the power of mind to the conservation of money, then it is not just labor transformed into the commercial gains of the rich people. Then the power of mind will have to be calculated. And if you do that, then it's not a two-way war. It's a triangular war, where mind come power, mind come labor. They will change the results of their interplay. So it is the mind which ultimately controls. Marx was not only clever, but he was a very cunning person. He built his dialectical materialism on the dialectical idealism of Hegel, yet rejected it. No, it is dialectical materialism, not dialectical idealism. While he knew well that without powerful ideas, no material changes can be brought about in the world. So he employed his mind to help the dialectical materialism achieve the purpose to which he wanted to lead it, and failed because of lack of morality. So the inherent defects always, pay the wrong way in the end, unfortunately. So this is the situation in the world where we must be very cautious in letting religion play any role in politics other than the role of human consciousness, universality of man, other than the role of warning people that racialism in any form will not help you, other than the role of telling the whole people, the world, that this rise of religious dogma is a deadly poison for not only for the Muslim world, where you find it raising its head more prominently, but also for the Christian world. Wherever it raises its head, the head of humanity will be lowered. Moral values will mean nothing in human affairs. And that is unfortunately the problem we are facing in the world today. This is what the politics has to be taught. And convincingly, I believe we can do that, but nobody will listen to us because they are not moral enough to listen to reason. Right?
Thank you.
Thank you. We have some time,
Yes.
a little bit. Yes.
Would you like- Anyone?
And I'm sorry, what about women? Why all women? Why?
Yes.
Why?
You see, because the history of the veil cannot be ignored before you come to the end product here. It has a long root in human culture, society, and moral behavior. The moment the veil began to be lifted, not in the material terms, I mean, in terms of moving in the direction of promiscuousness and permissive behavior, the society began to move away from peace. Because in the human affairs, it is not just the material world which matters. Love, passion, desire to be satiated in the areas of romantic longings many a time plays a much greater role than one's ambition to rise to power or one's ambition to amass money. This again was a factor completely forgotten by Marx. A society can never be leveled by mechanical measures like the measures which were suggested by Marx, because only two were the main factors which were before him: leveling the society from economic point of view, leveling the society from the point of view of power. The simple calculation was that if you level it perfectly from economic point of view, there will be no need to have any power system anymore. So if Marx was right, he had to be accepted also in his utopian vision of society, where once the bulldozer of Marxism levels the whole society, there is nothing left of crime. There is no state. Yet he knew there was something wrong in it. So he said, for the time being, we have to have access to state authority because we have dangers from outside. It was not the dangers from outside alone, because the dangers from outside should have resulted in a very well calculated foreign policy and measures of improving and tightening the rules and laws of immigration and these tariff laws and things, literature and things. It was not so. Marx was afraid of human freedom. Human freedom is a very important factor which can never be ignored. Freedom to have access to his desires. And the desires are not limited just to bread, and the wish to hold power. Even Marx himself had to admit it in a tragic way. When in England there was a period of, when Engels, was it the right, what is the right, Engels? Engels, yes. Engels could not financially help him as he used to, or there was a temporary break. Then he had to do some labor, not very hard labor, selling the papers or this and that, to earn his livelihood. And look at his remarks. The advocate of the dignity of labor. He said, I have been reduced even to do labor to earn my bread. And man cannot live by bread alone. He had to borrow this from the New Testament, and he realized, he admitted, he confessed that man could not live by bread alone. So there are so many factors. Human nature is a complex thing, many-sided splendor by God, created by God. So no attempt to reform the society and stabilize it in its reforms can ever be attempted, can never be seriously taken with disregard to human nature. And in that, my faith is strengthened in the Quranic teaching, because the Holy Quran exactly says the same thing. It says it is a teaching related to the human nature. And human nature is the middle path. Human nature is the reference point. So all the possible inclinations of nature on this side or that side have to be kept in view before you legislate regarding human behavior. So these are all the factors which have to be considered. But if somebody is serious enough in these things, that is the problem, My problem is the one which is so often mentioned but perhaps seldom taken note of, that once it is said the rats decided to rebel against the cat, right? And they had a big conference. After everything was decided, strategy was made, a discipline was enforced, at least in policy. Then they said, all right, everything is fine, but how shall we know that the cat is coming? Because it stealthily gazes, upon us and steadily pounces. So unless we have an answer to this, what can we do about it? So a wise rat stood up and said, the best thing is to have a bell hang from the neck of the cat. Everybody applauded. Well done. Absolutely beautiful. But when it came to the question of who will hang the bell, that was, the bell the cat, I think is there's no answer. I know this much, that the cat has to be belled, but who will bell the cat? That is the problem, right? On that note, I take leave of you, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
It was a very pleasant invitation.